The 2024-25 Premier League campaign is on the horizon. In preparation, we're previewing every single team and discussing how they'll shape up over the next campaign. We take a look at the transfer business conducted by the teams so far and offer suggestions of who else they should move for before the season gets started. We continue the series today with Bournemouth. A promising season headlined by Solanke's goal-scoring form sees them head into this campaign with heightened optimism. In this video, we discuss the signings they need to push into the top 10. This is our 2024-25 season preview for Bournemouth. Alright, let's talk about Bournemouth then. Well, we want to start with last season by touching on what was actually, in the end, a really strong campaign for Bournemouth. But we can't talk about last season without talking about their torrid start. In the first 9 games of last year, they didn't win a single one. It was a really poor start for Iraola, but I think when you consider that, it makes last season seem even more impressive for Bournemouth.
Yeah, 100%. As you say, it was a really, really tough start to the campaign and a tough start to life in the Premier League for Iraola. But I mean, as you say, I think it makes their achievements last season even greater because they did so well to turn it around. Credit to the Bournemouth board for sticking with him, giving him time because he is a very good manager. And they had a chance to prove that in the end as they, climbed up the table really. But yeah, as you say, to be honest, I thought they were in big trouble in those first 12 games. But yeah, did really well to steady the ship, turn it back round and soar up the table, nearly closing in on the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, they finished 12th in the end. And when you take those first 9 out of the equation, if you think, going into this season, if they can try and alleviate that poor patch, then suddenly Bournemouth could see themselves rising into that top 10. So super competitive last season. And I think what impressed me the most was their ability to dominate the smaller sides in most of their games, and then against the top sides give them a really good go on a lot of occasions. And it's something Iraola expects to do with the way he plays football. It's very aggressive, very high pressing football, very high scoring. We've seen goals at both ends of Bournemouth this season, and that's indicative of the style Iraola wants to play. He doesn't want to play on the back foot. He wants to go and attack the opposition. And Bournemouth have been made better because of it. They play really aggressive, really flowing, attacking football now. And with the young players at their disposal and with clear recruitment focuses on younger players, bringing them through, I think the future looks really bright for Bournemouth. So, yeah, effective pressing football. Saw them climb up the table last season after what was a really difficult start. And I think if they can take momentum and belief from that last campaign, they're setting themselves up for a really successful 24-25 season. So let's have a look then at what they've been doing so far this window. We'll start with the outgoings because there is one big one and then a couple others. So we'll start with the big one. Lloyd Kelly leaving and joining Newcastle on a free. This is a big loss for Bournemouth.
Yeah, I think so. It is to be honest, on a free will probably be frustrating to Bournemouth fans. It's a really surprising deal, to be completely honest. It's one of those, why has he gone for free? I mean, realistically, it's a no-brainer for him. He's off at Newcastle. He's going to have a great time. But yeah, for Bournemouth, this is a really tough one. It is imperative that they replace him, and they will. I'm sure they will in due course. But yeah, I think this is a big loss.
Well, I offered big praise for the Bournemouth board a moment ago with their recruitment, but now I think it's worth reining that in a little because obviously Lloyd Kelly this summer, the same happened with Jefferson Lerma last summer. They've got to get on top of some of these player contracts because to continuously lose some of your best players for frees, it's not the greatest business model. So they've got to be wary of that. And in actual fact, it's better to lose those players for what would have been at least some money last summer than it would be this summer. Where I feel that Lloyd Kelly, very good player, but it's not impossible to replace him for Bournemouth. And they do have a bit of money, so it's not the worst deal, but still, to lose a player like that for free when you probably could have got 15-20 million for him, it's a bit of a shame.
Yeah, I think so. But as you say, they know what they're doing. I'm sure they'll replace him, and obviously we'll touch on that later. But overall, it's a shame really for Bournemouth fans to see him go.
Yeah, and it does leave them very short because he was a left-back and left centre-half option that now they've lost, and that does leave them quite weak in those areas, as we're going to touch on later. The other departures, Jamal Lowe left on a free to Sheffield Wednesday, Joe Rothwell's gone out on loan to Leeds United, and Kiefer Moore to Sheffield United for 1.5 million. So Jamal Lowe, someone who wasn't really going to feature this season.
But again, as you say, leaves you in a bit of spot of bother. You've lost 2 players there who can play on the left-hand side. Left back, sorry. So that's another area.
Jamal Lowe's the winger. Are you thinking Max Lowe at Sheffield United?
I am thinking Max Lowe.
Jamal Lowe plays out wide. He didn't really feature for a whole lot for Bournemouth last season, And I think at Wednesday, though, he's got a chance to sort of reignite his career. He can have a successful campaign and try and rebuild, because he hasn't done a lot in the last year. He wasn't a key part of the Bournemouth squad. He won't be a huge miss, I don't think. Joe Ruffell on loan to Leeds. Again, he's not really a Premier League player, but a good enough player for the Championship. And then Kiefer Moore, I think a similar story. He was very good for Ipswich in the back half of the 23-24 campaign, very integral to their promotion push. I think with Sheffield United, if they're looking to bounce back immediately, that's a really good deal for £1.5 million. So, yeah, for Bournemouth, though, not a huge loss. Let's talk incomings then, because along with Moore going to Sheffield United, they have bought a Sheffield United striker for free. So, not really bought him. But Daniel Jefferson joins the club. Now, I found this a little bit of a weird one, because he hasn't played a whole lot of Premier League football. However, on a free transfer, there isn't really any risk attached here. So, I like it.
Yeah, I do. To be honest, it makes sense. Really, it feels like a kind of a swap between Jefferson and Kiefer Moore, which favours Bournemouth massively because they got $1.5 million from it.
And probably a better player.
Exactly. That's the thing. Jefferson, he's probably a little bit better player. He's only 21, 22. He's on a free. It's a risk-free. It's a risk-free transfer. If he develops really well, he could turn into a good striker. If he doesn't, then we'll probably see him going out on loan over the next few years and not really doing anything. But if that happens, it's not a loss for Bournemouth. It's a free transfer. I think it's a good deal.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. I think my one comment is I'm confused to why he didn't play much last season. I'm guessing he must have had an injury, because Sheffield United were down with like 5 games to go. You'd think they'd give a run to a younger player to try and get some Premier League minutes. So I'm guessing he had injuries last season, but yeah, I'm confused to why he didn't play more last season for Sheffield United. Let's look at other transfers then. So Bournemouth have got 2 who were on loan last season, so they're pretty easy to talk about. Enes Ünal has joined now permanently from Getafe, and Luis Sinisterra from Leeds. Ünal for 13 million and Sinisterra for 20 million. I thought Enes Ünal had a really strong impact, and with the interest in Dom Solanke, I think this is a really smart deal to get over the line.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think Ünal only had 2 or 3 starts actually, but he put up 2 goals, 2 assists from that. But as you say, he's not their out-and-out striker, and to be honest, he does well as that rotation with Solanke. He comes on when you need a goal. He can play the games where you can rely on him. He's a good signing, I think, because he is a reliable striker that isn't going to play every single game, but when you call upon him, he's going to find the back of the net and he's going to play well. And we saw that when he had these cameos in the Premier League. He came off the bench a lot last season. But yeah, no, good player. At 13 million, it's an okay transfer fee. I think it makes sense to bring him back.
I think there's huge upside here, because as you say, he's happy to play those rotation minutes for now. But if Dom Solanke puts up the same numbers he did last season in the 24-25 season, I think there'll rightfully be a lot of interest in him. So I get what Ünal's thinking here, because if Solanke leaves, suddenly the starting role becomes available. And again, if Ünal can impress in those limited minutes, I think Bournemouth would be more than comfortable with him being their starting 100%. Forward. So the upside's there with Ünal for both him and for Bournemouth. So I think it's a really good deal. On Sinisterra, I think it's a little bit of a weird one. I think he did well with the minutes he was given last season, but Bournemouth have a lot of players that can play both wings. I do think it's a good signing, but at 20, and he did show glimpses last season, Bournemouth, but for 20 million, you'd want to see a bit more reassurance. I think he could have a really decent season. I'll be intrigued to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it was only a 6-month cameo, wasn't it, for Sinisterra last season?
I think so.
I know, joining in January, so it's a bit hard to tell, but we know he's a good player from his time at Leeds. He put in some really good performances for them, and he didn't look. He didn't look miles away from it in the first 6 months at Bournemouth last season. So I definitely think on a permanent, it is a little bit steep potentially, but we're going to find out. If he tears it up, then suddenly we're looking at it being a bit of a bargain, really. So I think he's a very good player. If he plays the way we know he can, I think he can have a really good season. Especially, again, it's that thing, you play around better players, you become a better player yourself. If he's up there with the likes of Dominic Solanke, then I'm hoping to see some good performances from Sinisterra.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad signing at all. I just think the price is a little bit steep, and I don't think he's a guaranteed performer. But
100%.
If he can show that quality that he showed in glimpses last season for Bournemouth, then I think he's someone who can have a really strong impact. But when you consider that you'll likely start Tavernier on that left-hand side, Kluivert through the middle, there's not really a starting spot for Sinisterra. In which case, do you drop someone out? They'll rotate. It's the 38-game Premier League season. You've you've got loads of cup competitions and stuff like that. So there's loads of minutes to go around. But it's that prioritisation, because Tavernier was so good last season. Kluivert played really well last season. How can you justify benching either of those for Sinisterra? And if it's £20 million on a rotation option, then again that opens up question marks, because he'd be competing with Dango Uatara for rotation minutes. I know Uatara can play left back as well, but there's a lot of question marks for me. I think it's a good signing. I'll be intrigued to see how it pans out.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, it makes sense, because as you speak about that rotation, realistically, and we'll touch on it at the end in terms of what we expect from Bournemouth, but for me, they should be planning a squad that's expecting to play a lot of games next season. I'd like to see them go deep in the cups. I'd like to see them challenging, in the big games in the Premier League. And so they've got their business, for me, this window's got a plan around that. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw an FA Cup run from Bournemouth. Now, I say that would probably get knocked out in round 3 of the campaign.
I feel Carabao Cup is more Bournemouth competition.
Yeah.
I could picture them going deep into that. Yeah, fair enough. Let's talk about their other signing then. Alex Paulson, a backup goalkeeper from Wellington Phoenix. He's only 19, coming in at £2 million. I don't know much about him, I'll be honest. I think that's quite fair. I don't think many people will know much about him. But from the limited things I have read and seen, there seems to be a lot of hype around this kid.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, he's done well for Wellington Phoenix in Australia. And very recently, he's looked really good in the Olympics as well. So
yeah, I did see that.
So that's another positive. Yeah, it makes sense. It's a small transfer fee for a young and exciting goalkeeper. He's going to offer competition again to your other goalkeepers in there. But yeah, it's a good deal. It's a smart deal.
Yeah, again, we talk about this quite a lot, but when you're considering transfers, it's about weighing up the upside and the downside.
Yeah.
There is very little downside here, because the worst that happens is he doesn't turn out to be as good as he looks and you lose £2 million. Ultimately, that's not a whole lot for a football club to lose. Or he becomes a really strong goalkeeper and you've got your starting keeper, because Neto's done really well for them, but let's not beat around the bush. Neto isn't going to be playing at the top level for too much longer. I think he's now in his 30s, so
must be, surely.
Yeah, so he can't have a huge amount of time left. Bring in a young goalkeeper who can learn under that stewardship, who can grow into the role. For me, it's really smart business. And if that upside is huge, if he turns out to be one of the best goalkeepers, £2 million feels like an absolute steal.
Yeah, 100%.
So, yeah, definitely looks like a good deal. So let's have a look then at the squad makeup. We'll put a graphic up on screen now to have a look through it. So we expect they'll line up in the same 4-2-3-1 that they lined up in last season. I don't expect any wholesale changes to the structure. It'll be interesting to see who starts in specific roles. So let's start in goal. We expect Norberto Neto will keep his starting berth. It'll be a bit soon to rush Paulson in, and Neto didn't really do anything wrong last season, so it'd be harsh to drop him. You've also got Travers, I believe, is still on the books at Bournemouth. I haven't seen otherwise, so he will still be that rotation option, and then Paulson is another option. Looking at the back four then, I think looking at this left-hand side of the defence, with Lloyd Kelly there's a huge gap. You've got one left-back in Milos Kerkez. Now, I know Uatara can cover there, so it's not the biggest issue in the world, but I think they'd want someone else to compete with Kerkez on a starting basis. So I think they'll look for a left-back, and we're going to look at potential examples in a moment. I think Kerkez is a very good player. From what I saw last season, from what I've watched of him, he showed a little bit of the Euros as well. He's a very good attacking fullback, and I think he's someone who could easily be one of the best left-backs in the Premier League. I think he's got that kind of potential. For Bournemouth, it's about how you harness that, and I think the best way to do it is to give him a bit of competition this season. Too often last season, he could have a bit of a bad performance, and because there wasn't really the option to rotate him, he kept starting at left-back. So a bit of pressure, a little bit of competition, healthy competition, I think is really crucial for player development. Left centre-half, then they've only got Marco Senesi. Now, I know obviously Zabarnyi, Metham and Hill, all right centre-halves, could play left centre-half. It's not the end of the world. But I think they'd like to bring in another left centre-half. And actually, it's believed they have agreed a signing that might be announced before this video goes out. So we're going to touch on that in a moment. As I said, they've got quite a lot of right centre-half options. Again, Ilya Zabarnyi, someone I rate really highly. I think he's looked really good in the Premier League. He's adapted well to it. Some people rightfully had question marks over whether he could adapt from playing in Ukraine to coming in and competing in the Premier League. But I think he's shown that he's not really been faced by that.
Yeah, no, I've been thoroughly impressed. And the two defenders, Zabarnyi and Kerkez, are the best examples of how this Bournemouth side is taking these very good players and talents and bringing them into the Premier League, giving them a platform to shine on, not only to again, it's smart business from Bournemouth. I mean, I know these players were bought in a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever. But either they're going to be phenomenal players for Bournemouth, or they're going to make massive profits. So yeah, it's good to see. I've been thoroughly impressed with them last season. I expect to see the same performance again this season, and if that happens again, then things are looking on the up for Bournemouth.
Yeah, very true. I think, again, you look at this squad and there's a really nice mix of some talented young players that they're gambling on being superstars, and then some fairly reliable players sort of in the middle of their career who they are taking to the next level. I think Senesi is probably a really good example of that. At Feyenoord, a solid player, someone that we probably wouldn't have seen go anywhere else other than Feyenoord and clubs and similar clubs, which isn't the worst thing, but he's come into the Premier League now and he's looked really solid for Bournemouth, and that does give him a platform potentially to move elsewhere, but he also might be a really solid player for Bournemouth, as he has been so far. Right back then, we expect Max Aarons will continue to start in that role. He looked really comfortable playing right back in this Iraola system. You've still got Adam Smith at the club as a backup right back, but that is going to be something they're going to have to look to sort out next season, because I think Smith will likely leave at the end of his contract next summer. Yeah. Then in midfield, you've got two options, defence midfield. You've got Tyler Adams and you've got Lewis Cook. Adams is someone who I think went a bit under the radar last season. I'd completely forgot they signed him in January.
Yeah.
But yeah, he seemed to play. I mean, he didn't do anything wrong. I haven't seen him do anything bad. But yeah, went under the radar a bit, I think.
Yeah, no, I really like him. I think he's a very good player. I feel like, as you say, he's gone a bit under the radar. Obviously, came in with Jesse Marsh, didn't he? As part of the American contingent going on at Leeds.
Yeah.
But and I feel like that was tough because Leeds weren't very good that season. But we know he's a very good player, and as you say, he kind of had to sit another 6 months in the Premier League where he didn't set the world on fire, but didn't do too badly. And I'm expecting good things from him again coming into this season. He's a very tidy player, and it's another deal back in January that makes. That elevates the level of this Bournemouth side. He's an incredible midfielder who, again, can reach the top of his game very, very well. Well, hopefully he will reach the top of his game.
Yeah, very true. And then the other midfield option, you've got Alex Scott in there, who I rate incredibly highly. I think he's going to be one of the stronger midfielders in the Premier League. 100%. And I think if he can really shine this season, he should be in line for an England cap, I think. That could happen this season if he performs well enough. So yeah, I think he's clearly very talented. You've also got you've got Christie in that role, who was more of an attack midfielder, but we've seen him drop into midfield this season for Iraola, and actually he's played really well in that role, so I think he'll continue to play there. You've also got Billing now, who feels a bit of an afterthought, but he can cover both midfield options. He's still very strong. I mean, again, this midfield is very versatile. I know I've set it up as Adams and Cook and then the other three, but you could easily see a Billing and a Scott midfield or something like that. So yeah, it's not too. I just wanted to put them down on the graphics so we can have a look at them. So then into the front line, then this is where I think there's quite a lot of players, and I think there could be some cuts made to this Bournemouth side. On the left hand side, you've got Sinistera, Uatara, and Jayden Anthony. Now, Jayden Anthony obviously went on loan to Leeds as part of the Sinistera thing. He's back at the club now. There are some rumours he might go back to Leeds, but that hasn't obviously happened yet. I think Bournemouth will probably look to move on Jayden Anthony. The other options in that role, Sinistera, as we've already spoken about, could be really good. And Dangu Uatara, I know he played a fair bit of left back last season, but he is frighteningly quick.
Yeah.
And I think we saw small glimpses of what he can do last season. If he can explode into life this season, he could be a really dangerous player for Bournemouth.
Yeah, I mean, that left-hand side is scary for Bournemouth. Any of those players are going to play. They're going to cause. I think what I like about Sinistera and Uatara especially, just the way they're very, very dangerous players, and as a defender, it's very hard to keep up with them. They can take fullbacks completely out of the game if they're on their day.
Yeah.
I mean, Uatara's got the pace to beat anyone. Sinistera, has got the footwork and the skill ability to just knock it past a few players, and they're very dangerous wingers. They're the type of players that could completely turn the game on its head. And that is crucial for Bournemouth, I think. But yeah, it's a very dangerous left-hand side, that.
Yeah, definitely. Switching over to the right-hand side, you've got Antoine Semenyo, who is someone I don't really rate too highly, but he has always perform reliably in the Premier League. So there's not really any reason to change. I think if they were looking at sort of raising the ceiling of this squad, that right-hand side would be a profile I think they should look at. But Semenyo's performed, so it'd be hard to justify him going. Romain Favre can play also on that right-hand side. We've not really seen him play much for Bournemouth. No. Again, I think he had injuries last season, so it'd be interesting if he gets more involvement this season. And then obviously David Brooks, who is coming back into football after obviously recovering from cancer. It's fantastic to see him back, and hopefully we could see him start, I think, this season. He started to build up his minutes last season. If he can have a strong pre-season, build up that fitness, I think he could look to be playing for Bournemouth. That would be ultimately his goal for next season. In attacking midfield now, I've put Marcus Tavernier in there because, again, I think with Sinisterra coming in on that left-hand side, it's expected that he'll have a lot of minutes. But again, Tavernier can cover anywhere on that front three, really, behind Solanke, of course. Then you've got Justin Kluivert as well, who played really well in that attacking midfield role. And then Traoré, Hamed Traoré. I don't think Iraola rates him very highly. They signed him last summer. He's not played a whole lot. I don't think he was included in the pre-season squad. I think I saw that somewhere, but I might be mistaken. I don't think he's a player Iraola rates particularly highly. I wouldn't be surprised if they looked for a low move this season with a view of moving him on next summer. I don't think they'd be able to get much resale right now because he didn't play a whole lot last season. But, year time, maybe they could get something. I think they may look for a low move there. In the front line then, Solanke, Unal, Jebbison. I mean, we haven't really touched on Dom Solanke, but incredible campaign last season from him.
Yeah, I mean, I like Dominic Solanke. I think he's a very, very dangerous striker. He's got a brilliant eye for goal, but it's not only his goals, it's his goal contributions as well, the way, he gets other players involved. And I think, that is a side of his game that maybe isn't focused on so much. That, there's a reason that the likes of Tavernier and Kluivert had a phenomenal season as well last year. I think Tavernier was quality, because when he's linking up with Dominic Solanke, they're creating incredible chances and scoring a ton of goals. And I think for Bournemouth, if Solanke can bring high numbers again this campaign, it's going to be a frightening sight, this forward line for the Cherries. I think Solanke, as you say, as we touched on earlier, there's going to be people sniffing around him next summer if he can deliver the same performances. He's a very, very good player, and I would expect him to get a move higher up soon, but that doesn't mean that this season he can't deliver the same volume of attacking returns that he did last campaign.
Yeah, I am somewhat surprised there's not more interest in Solanke. The only explanation I have for it is that clubs are waiting towards the end of this summer to then go and make a move. The other thing is, obviously, he is now 27, so you've not got a whole load of years there. And when you consider the clubs in the Premier League, Liverpool don't really need a striker, City don't really need a striker, Arsenal don't really need a striker. Chelsea seem to be happy with Nkunku and Jackson. Tottenham apparently just don't want to sign one. And so that puts them in a weird position. And then I'm forgetting someone in the Big Six. United don't need a striker, they've signed two. So the scale the progression for Solanke is not really there, because Villa aren't going to sign someone that is too close to Ollie Watkins. And who's above Bournemouth other than that?
Yeah, exactly.
Newcastle, they've got Isak, you're not starting Solanke. So I think the issue for Solanke is there isn't really a big move, unless Tottenham finally decide they want a striker, or Chelsea do. But even in that example, I think they both look at Ivan Toney before looking at Solanke. So Solanke is a little bit of a victim of circumstances here, but if there was to be a big bid this summer, I think it would be smart for Bournemouth to consider that.
Yeah, 100%.
Because I think if you're looking anywhere over 50 million, maybe that's a little steep. 40 million, I think you've got to consider that a very good price.
Yeah, I think they want to see a big fee, but as you say, if it's near 50 million, I think you've got to take it. Because you can do a lot with 50 million. He's a very, very good player, but that is a fee that I just don't think you can turn down. Especially with Bournemouth's recruiting abilities, I'd expect them to go and replace him with another very good player.
Yeah, definitely so. I mean, they've already got Unal and Jebbison, which could be a stopgap. I'm sure they'd go out and look for other options. So let's have a look then at some players I think Bournemouth should sign. So we mentioned left back and left centre half as options as well, spots that need improvement. Let's start with left centre half, because this deal may well be confirmed before this video goes out, and it's the signing of Juventus's Dean Huijsen. The Dutch centre half was on loan last season at Roma. He's believed to be coming into Bournemouth for £15 million. This seems like a really decent signing. Yeah,
very much so. He coming through Juventus, as you say, out on loan at Roma. He played a handful of games, but again, this is another example of Bournemouth picking up a very exciting, promising young player who could deliver very high performances to a very high ability, not only now but definitely going to develop. It makes sense. They need a left centre half. They're going to go and get one. It's exactly what I'd call a Bournemouth signing. It's a young player, very talented, good now, even better in the future, and it's exactly filling the requirements of exactly what they need.
Yeah, it's taking a punt on someone who's 19 years old, hasn't played a whole lot of senior football, but the upside's really there. He can play. I mean, I was looking whether he's left or right footed. Apparently, he's both. So ambidextrous, can play both. Centre half options. I don't think he can play left back, so we're going to look at a left back in a moment, but he seems to be a really nice option to rotate with Senesi. And again, we mentioned there's going to be a lot of minutes available this season for those Bournemouth players. Huijsen, I think, is someone who could definitely take advantage of those cup games. Maybe towards the second half of the campaign, start to get more starting Premier League minutes. But yeah, he's someone I think is a very low-risk signing. I don't really see how this goes horribly wrong. The worst that happens is he doesn't really fulfil the potential, but I still think he'd be able to fetch a not too dissimilar fee to what you're paying for him.
Yeah.
So in that regard, I think it's a really nice signing for Bournemouth. I think it's 15 million with then 4 million in add-ons. So again, very decent stuff. And it's befitting with what Bournemouth's recruitment tends to be. Young players with huge upsides. And again, I think it's a really good deal. So yeah, should be interesting. I mean, his FBref profile on screen, his in possession numbers are really strong. He ranked in the 91st percentile across all centre halves in the top 5 leagues for passes completed, which when we think about how Bournemouth want to play with the ball on the floor, getting it forwards, very free-flowing possession football, attacking football, that's exactly what you want. Switches as well in the 77th percentile, clearances in the 75th percentile, which I find a little bit weird, but I guess that's helpful if you are a team that's perhaps not the strongest defensively and you need to just clear that long.
Yeah.
Not a bad thing. I'm slightly worried about his defensive numbers. His tackles are okay, up in the 70th percentile, about 1.72 per 90. But his tackles 1, interceptions, tackle interceptions, and aerials is particularly worrying. Those aerials 1 is only at 56%, which is as low as the 33rd percentile. So I do think there are some fears, but he's very good in possession. But so that, clear upside there.
Yeah.
The only fear is he going to be physically imposing enough to be in the Premier League? Again, though, he is only 19, so it's not impossible that he, develops and becomes a bit more physical, a bit stronger with time. So I think it's a really decent signing, and I think he's someone who could have a really good impact for Bournemouth in the future.
100%.
So then at left back, now this one is a little bit more ambitious, but I'm going to suggest Fran Garcia. Playing for Real Madrid. Now, I know Bournemouth signing players from Real Madrid feels mental, but Fran Garcia, in the season before last, played for Anthony Raiola at Rayo Vallecano. Obviously, Real Madrid this summer are expected to go in for Alphonso Davies, which then leaves them with Mendy and Davies. Now, I don't really see where Fran Garcia fits in all of that, so I think you could get him for a relatively cheap price. And if you look at his FBref profile, he is one of the most exciting attacking fullbacks I've seen in a while. He ranks in the 98th percentile for assists. He ranks in the 96th percentile for progressive carries. His ball recoveries in the 93rd percentile. His touches, goal-creating actions, both in the 80s. For me, he is someone who could have a really good impact. Obviously, he knows the Iraola system, having played it for, I believe, 2 seasons with Iraola at Rayo Vallecano. It makes a lot of sense, this signing.
Yeah, 100%. This is an Iraola signing written all over it, isn't it? He knows his system, as you say. He's a very attacking fullback, similar to, maybe returning better numbers than Kirkej will, but it's similar in the same vein of that attacking intent. It's exactly what Iraola's looking for, and as you say, you talk about that competition with Kirkez. This is a player who can compete with his numbers, who can put up the same, if not better, returns. We talk about that; those assists are incredible numbers, and if he can provide that, if you're putting the ball onto Dom Solanke, if you've got a pinpoint cross onto Dom Solanke's head every time, you're going to be racking up assists for every single game.
And Solanke will get the golden vote, which is what we all want to see, really.
Yeah. So it's a perfect signing for Bournemouth. It would be, again, these are both deals, a healthy competition that are raising the ability of this Bournemouth squad.
Yeah, my thing with Fran Garcia is I expect him to be a starter, and I think some people will rightfully go, well, does that block Milos Kerkez? However, Garcia is very, very good, but if Kirkesh wants to prove himself to be one of the strongest left backs in the Premier League, eventually, he's got to be challenged. And this, I think, is the appropriate level of challenge, because Garcia should come in and be immediately better than him. But it's not a huge gap to close. I think Kirkesh is incredibly highly talented. If he wants to be even better, this is the kind of competition that I think Bournemouth need to give him next season. I think Fran Garcia, I'd expect around that £15 million mark would be a really good signing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, again, that would be a good deal. And to be honest, Bournemouth, they make a lot of risk-free signings. I think this would be a good one. There's not much risk involved, because I think you would come in and do very well. But as you say, it would create... perhaps it's too harsh a competition, but equally, to be the best, you've got to beat the best. So I think it would be very helpful for Kirkesh and for Bournemouth, because obviously Garcia would massively help the performance of the team.
Yeah, would be a huge signing. So there as our suggestions for what Bournemouth should do. Shall we talk about some loose predictions for next season? Because I think it's going to be very competitive to get into the top 10. So where do you see Bournemouth shaking out come, a year's time?
Well, that's the thing. I'm expecting big things from Bournemouth, but as you say, I feel like they could be a victim of the fact that it is so competitive in the top 10 right now, because I think Bournemouth will deliver good performances again. I think they'll play good football, and they'll go out and they'll get some big wins. But the problem is, it's very difficult to crack into that top 10. So I worry that even with an improved performance, they could still find themselves exactly where they were this season. 11th, 12th kind of area, which... I mean, obviously they wouldn't be too annoyed about, but as I said, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a cup run or some big results from Bournemouth coming out this season. And who knows, if they get it right, maybe they could push into that top 10. So yeah, I'm expecting a positive season for Bournemouth no matter what.
Yeah, very true. As you say, it is very competitive. I think you've got about 3 or 4 teams now competing for 10th, because I think Palace will be in that conversation. I think Brighton will be in that conversation. I think that Wolves would like to be in that conversation, though maybe not now that they've sold Kilman. I think that West Ham would want to be in there.
Yeah.
The top 9 you'd think is fairly solid, but even then, it's the teams that aren't infallible. So there is an opportunity there. So I think it's very interesting. I'd love to see Bournemouth make a run at Europe. I mean, that would be very exciting. I'm just not sure whether that's going to happen yet. I think there is still a little bit of a gap to close to those top sides. But equally, the big advantage Bournemouth have this season is they don't have Europe.
Yeah.
You look at all the other teams in that top lot, and I think that clubs like Villa could struggle because they picked up so many injuries last season and they didn't have European football. Well, they did, but it wasn't Champions League, to be fair. But with Champions League football, it's going to be even more intensive. I think with Bournemouth, they could take advantage of those teams if they play them at the right times. Say Villa have played Real Madrid in the week and then they've got Bournemouth at the weekend. I think they could take advantage of things like that. So it's going to be really interesting. I think that Bournemouth are poised to make a push up the table. At the very least, I don't see them dropping this season. So I mean, maybe 1 position, 2 positions, but I don't see them being dragged to the relegation fight.
No.
Don't really see them being in trouble there. So I think they're in a fairly solid position. For me, it's about building on the foundations they had last season and then pushing next season again, because they're not gonna. It's not easy to break into that top lot, but if they can slowly start to just gain a couple positions every season, eventually they're going to win the Premier League. So they've just got to keep that steady progression.
Be patient.
See where things go. I think Iraola's a really top coach, so I think they're set up really well. Will be good to see them next season. But that's everything, I think, for this video. If you are enjoying these previews, then do go and check out our one from yesterday where we spoke about Aston Villa. That will be on screen now. And look out for the next 17 as we build up to the 24-25 season. That's everything from us today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.